Well, I think historically, from the mid-90s, there was an exceptional boom that went on through the early part of the 90s to about 1996, 1997. At that point, it pulled back. And I think that some of the reason that it pulled back was a backlash from consumers where they weren't getting fresh beer. You know, the industry was founded on this concept of fresh and local, and all of a sudden in 96, 97, 98 you started seeing breweries from Colorado, breweries from California, breweries from all over the place shipping their beer into this market, and vice versa. And I think that the consumer was finding beer that was old, that was stale, that was bad, where the quality control wasn't what it could have been. We had a lot of people at that time coming into the industry that really didn't have a beer background. They were seeing it as sort of this goose that would lay these golden eggs. If we brew beer, they will come kind of a thing. Those people have really shaken out of the industry. So now the people that are in it, it's real strong. We've got real good beers out there. People understand fresh beer now. They understand that local is an important part of fresh beer. And we're seeing the business really expand. It was at the 1997, 1998, there were about 1,400 breweries, small breweries in the United States. That number dropped back to under 1,000 in the early 2000s. Right now we're at 1,700 this year.
Where do you see that going? I mean, do you think that number will, 5 years from now, will that be a bigger number or a smaller number?
I think that it'll probably be a smaller number. I don't think that it's as big as it's going to be, but I think that there's going to be another shakeout.
So the bubble hasn't burst, but it's going to.
I think so. And
why?
I don't think that it's a bubble about selling beer. I don't think that it's a craft segment bubble that's going to burst. I think you'll continue to see growth in that segment. But what I think you're going to find out is that over the past 3 or 4 years, and projected, there's 600 breweries in the planning stages right now that are looking at coming online within the next year. What people are going to find out is that you have to be of a certain size to have a production brewery and make a paycheck. You know, it's a cold hard fact that you have to be a certain size. You know, I look at that size at about 10,000 barrels of production. That's where you start to actually make money. A lot of guys can hold on and try and get to that point, but getting to that point is difficult. And I think you'll see people drop off, or breweries drop out of the picture because they can't attain that quantity where you get the economies of scale. As far as the actual industry itself, I expect that to continue to grow. So what that tells you is that I think that the breweries that are successful today are going to be even more successful going forward because the segment's going to grow, and there's going to be fewer breweries 5 years from now than there may be 3 years from now.
Okay.
I think what you're seeing with Sierra and Sam Adams, etc., they're working very hard at chain store distribution, national chains, and being better at customer service. There was a survey that actually just came out today that ranked Sam Adams tied with Heineken for what they do for their national accounts, you know, how they handle them, and what they support them with, etc. So those bigger, and Sierra Nevada was also mentioned on that list. So the big small breweries are starting to have to work in the traditional gigantic brewery world.
I'm a little bit cynical though. I wonder how much of that customer service is legitimate and how much of it is, you know, not so legitimate. Do you think that's really people just feeling like they're being handled well, or is that money moving around to make tap lines appear?
I don't think it's money moving around to make tap lines appear. Necessarily, because this was a study or a survey done with national accounts. So it's not.
Was it draft though, or a mix of draft and
a mix of both?
Mix of both.
So on sort of that smaller level, where in a privately owned package store, privately owned restaurant, there's an opportunity to be that guy that greases the skids, and the owner would come back and be appreciative of that. I think it's a lot more difficult at the national level to get that, because national headquarters is taking the grease, not the guy that's in one of the national accounts as a foot soldier. So their views are probably a little less biased.
Do you think the real big companies, though, the Budweiser, the Millers, and the Coors, that they're going to figure out how to be a part of this craft beer game and actually figure it out? Because they seem kind of clueless so far.
I would disagree.
Please. Tell me your thoughts.
I'll use Blue Moon as my example. Now, maybe they got lucky. They may have rolled the dice on, Coors may have rolled the dice on Blue Moon and come up with a winner, but that's a brand that sells a lot of product. So they have the ability to come up with something that is, for lack of a better term, crafty. Whether or not it's craft, I don't know, but ultimately, craft is two things. Craft is not only the concept of fresh, local, small, independent brewery, but craft is a flavor profile. And at some point, there may be the divergence from the flavor profile needing to be made by a small brewer. And if that divergence happens, it's going to change the landscape again. Right now, that divergence hasn't happened that much because most people don't really understand that Blue Moon is a Coors product. But there is an opportunity, I think, for the larger breweries to ride on our backs and ride our success to selling product.
Well, beyond being the owner of Mercury Brewing, you also have, I believe, a prominent role with the Mass Brewers Guild. Is that correct?
That is. I'm president of the Massachusetts Brewers Guild. I sit on the Government Affairs Committee as well. And we support and work towards propagating more breweries in Massachusetts. We have 43 breweries in Massachusetts right now, and our mission is to support and protect those breweries.
So I know that you have one particular point that you've been trying to get resolved locally, with, I know you've been talking to senators and all sorts of local public figures as well as, wholesalers. Can you tell us a little bit about what that issue is and what you're trying to accomplish?
Sure. We've been working for a couple of years now, this is our second year working on it, on legislation that would allow the craft brewer, the small brewer, to be able to move between wholesalers. Right now, there's a law called franchise law on the books in Massachusetts. It's been on the books since 1971, and that law was put in place to protect the wholesalers. The landscape back then in 1971 was one of very few breweries in the United States. There was only one in Massachusetts, that was Carling, and they were Natick, and they were all of a reasonably large size. In Massachusetts, there were about 60 wholesalers at that point in time. They were all small mom-and-pop wholesalers. The law was put into place to protect the mom-and-pop wholesaler from one of their big brewers from arbitrarily pulling out of their wholesaler and going someplace else.
So what's gone wrong? Because I know that why it started, but what's really happening? How are the wholesalers using that law?
Well, what's happened is threefold. One, there's been incredible consolidation in the distribution business. There are really about 10 viable beer distributors in Massachusetts now. Now there's 43 entities that brew in Massachusetts. And the problem is that as a small brewer in a big wholesaler, you potentially don't get any share of mind. They can potentially shelve your product and not do a good job distributing it. And they really listen to different masters. All of the wholesalers in this state, they have major brands. They're either a Budweiser house, a Miller Coors house, Heineken, etc. And those brands really control how the wholesalers work because it's such a large portion of their business. For us, if I go into a wholesaler and a wholesaler doesn't do a good job selling my product, I don't have the ability to say, okay, thank you very much for your efforts. This is not a good fit for me. I'm going to bring it to a different wholesaler.
So I can give you a really extreme example. I know one local brewery that had product produced and delivered fresh to the wholesaler, and it was parked there for 6 months before it went out, so it was out of code and already bad. What would that brewer be able to do if you pass these laws to protect themselves? And why would the wholesaler, you're saying that one, they have other brands they're focusing on, but what are some other reasons why they would do that to a producer, and what will they be able to do to protect themselves?
Well, to answer your second question first, one of the reasons why they would do that could conceivably be a protectionist reason. If you have a brand that's doing well and fits a particular profile, and there's another brand out there that's looking to come into that territory that has that same profile, it's better for you to take that brand in-house and push it into the back corner than have your competitor take that brand on and go out and go head-to-head against the brand that you have. That's one reason why. Another reason could be that the wholesaler maybe had every good intention, but it ended up being a harder sell in the marketplace, and human nature dictates that salespeople are going to go in and they're going to sell what's easiest to sell. There doesn't necessarily have to be any backhanded reason for this to happen. It could just be that it's not working. That's not a good fit. Some beers are not.
So what are you
fit.
asking for a brewer like that to be allowed to do to just alleviate the problem?
What we're asking for is, if there is a problem such as that we go to the wholesaler, we say, you know what, Mr. Wholesaler, thank you for your efforts, but we are not a good fit. We would like to be able to move on. A price would be paid by the brewer to release the brewer from the wholesaler, which is a fair market price, and then the brewer would go and find a new wholesaler. If a fair market price can't be found, then binding arbitration would be used and a fee would be paid and the brewer would be able to move on. In any other industry, if I was selling bottle openers and I sold bottle openers to one store and they weren't doing a good job, I could sell bottle openers to another store. And in this industry, this is the only industry where you can't do that.
And how far you've been doing this for a couple of years? How close do you think you are to a resolution?
We currently have a bill that's been presented by Representative Peisch out of Wellesley. It's House number 1897. We have a hearing on that bill Tuesday, May 10th, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Okay, well, I wish you the best of luck with that, and very much appreciate your taking the time today to talk with me.
Absolutely.